Welcome back. In this session, we're going to look at the creative problem-solving process in more detail, so that you can better understand this process and can develop creative problem-solving skills and strategies that will help you become a better and more effective creative problem solver. This will help you both in your personal life and at work. In a previous lesson, we talked about the 4 stages of the creative problem-solving process identified by Osborne and Barnes in the 1950s: clarifying, ideating, developing, and implementing. More recently, my colleague, Dr. Min Basadur, reframed these in his research to generating, conceptualizing, optimizing, and implementing. We've been very fortunate to work with Min over the last few years on developing and enhancing these definitions. So those are the ones that we're going to be using in this course as we guide you through the creative problem-solving process. Once we've explained these stages, we will introduce you to a number of approaches that can improve your creative problem-solving ability as you move through the stages in practice. Let's start by hearing from Dr. Basadur about his research and the 4 stages of the process, with each stage having 2 steps.
There are actually 8 steps based on our research. And our research has been both in the field and in the laboratory, and discovering that the innovation process can be easily explained with these 8 steps. Now, the first stage is called generating, and it's made up of 2 steps. And one is called problem finding, and the second was called fact finding. Now, problem finding is, there's an old saying by Woody Allen saying, 80% of anything is just showing up. Problem finding is being aware of where you are, what's happening around you, seeing that almost everything might be relevant, and looking for possible problems and challenges that might be useful to bring into your life or into your company. So that's the first step. And then the second step is gathering information about whatever that possibility is. Not necessarily knowing where you're going, but just starting to understand what the problem is, what the possibility is. They say you've got a customer who's got a difficulty of some kind. Now we move into conceptualization stage, and there are 2 parts to that. One is called problem definition, where we start using the term how might we, and start developing that information we've gathered in the first stage into challenges, starting with how might we. And then we start asking why and what's stopping us, where we're getting into understanding the problem really, really well in terms of the higher level objectives and the lower level tactical problems that might be facing us. Okay, and these 3 steps, 1, 2, and 3, really comprise what we call problem formulation. None of them have anything to do with a solution. They all have to do with making sense of a situation and getting up with a really well-defined problem out of that mess, if we could say that. And now we're ready to move on to the 4th step, which is part of solution formulation. And in the 4th step, we call it idea finding, and this is where we start generating potential solutions to that problem. And often for us, that's easier than the first 3, because once you've got a good beat on what you're trying to do, the solutions can come a lot faster and quicker. And so the step 4 is basically, let's get some solutions, as many as we can, and pick some of the very best ones, which moves us into step 5, which is called evaluation and selection. So here's where we start setting up some formal criteria, talking to each other about what's really important, what criteria are we trying to meet, cost, time to implement, and we start evaluating those best bets. And we end up, out of those 2 steps, which we call solution formulation, and we end up with maybe 2, maybe 3 really, really good ideas. Now we're ready to move into the next step, which is 6, and 6, 7, and 8 are called implementation formulation. Step 6 is called planning. Now the name of the game is we want to get something good done. And that's step 8, which is action. Now how we get to action is by having a very clear plan made about how we're going to get there, to build commitment to where we're going. So step 6 is basically building a very concrete, detailed plan about how we're going to implement that idea that we picked. Step 7 is called gaining acceptance. Often, we might have a really good idea, but we have to gain acceptance from other people to implement it. Maybe it's my boss, maybe it's the president, maybe it's my team, but if I've left them out so far, now it's time to explain to them what the benefits are and where we're going and why it's a good idea. After we've done that, the last step in the circular process is action, and this is where we have to commit and take the plunge. And if you don't, somebody has to take the ball over the goal line, and the idea is to get this new idea into implementation and into the field. Once you've done that, you can go around the wheel again, because whatever happens will trigger new possibilities or help you figure out how to work your way through several times through the wheel.
Min's observation builds on the earlier work of Andy van der Ven, who observed that successful creative problem solving follows a consistent process. This is a really fundamental insight into what others may see as a random and disjointed process, both because it helps us interpret what's going on when we're actually involved in solving a problem, and also it helps develop frameworks for improving the process itself. While experienced and successful problem solvers might follow this process, from experience, I can tell you that most people don't. And they sub-optimize outcomes because they fail to clarify the real problem, instead focusing on a symptom or poorly defining the problem in the first place. Alternatively, they can close down insights from others, especially when they believe they already know what's going to be said, or view others, including themselves, as an expert. Or they rush to solutions, taking the most obvious one, which often doesn't solve the real problem or produces a suboptimal outcome. It's none other than Einstein who highlighted the need to focus on and clearly identify the real problem to be addressed. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Einstein highlights the importance of understanding the stages of the creative problem-solving process, spending sufficient time at each stage, and focus on good problem understanding and definition. This allows us to highlight key aspects to improve your creative problem-solving ability. First, it's important to make sure you identify the right problem. One example is using the 5 whys to analyze the root cause of the problem. Understanding the root cause often helps in coming up with better solutions. The second key approach to creative problem solving is that at each stage, you should first diverge to come up with multiple ideas and then converge to choose between them. A simple analogy of the divergence and convergence process is choosing with a bunch of friends where to eat. For example, you might start off by creating a long list of different possible places, diverging on the different options that are available. It could include fast food restaurants, full service restaurants, local snack bars, or downtown dining. You might discuss them in detail and then create this list and group together those that somehow similar to make choosing which one you want to easier. Once you have this expansive list, you need to decide your criteria for selection. For example, budget, location, or you want to eat healthy. You then go through the conversion process, using this framework, these tools, to select from the longer list of options. For example, you might start off with budget constraints, $15 a person, creating a shorter list. Then you might choose location. As you're all coming from different locations, downtown might be the most convenient for everyone. This creates an even shorter list, but still not a final solution. So then you can rank the remaining options based on, for example, choosing a healthy option. And this further narrows down, converging on 2 or 3 choices to allow the team to make an easier choice. These characteristics help you on the restaurant you choose. Min shares some insights into this divergence and convergence process.
This is a great process, but it requires some really definite skills as an engine to make it go. And one of them, and in every step of this process, we do a diverging portion where we no judgment is allowed. We just diverge on facts, ideas, problem definitions. We use our ability to not judge, but just generate possibilities. After we do that, we then take our time to start judging those possibilities and bring them down to the best ones, the very best ones. And we're careful not to mix those two. We call that the ability to defer judgment. And when we are diverging for possibilities, no judgment. When we are starting to converge, we do bring our judgment back and we listen to each other and we choose. And if it's a team, we try to get consensus on every step as we move on. So every single step of the 8 has a diverging portion and a converging portion in it.
The third key approach to improving creative problem solving is to suspend judgment. That's avoiding the tendency to leap to conclusions about whether an idea is good or bad, even your own. Leaping to conclusions can both discourage innovative or out-of-the-box solutions or shut down other people's ideas and other people shutting down your ideas too quickly. This can damage your ability to creatively problem solve by limiting the number of ideas and options considered and by discouraging people from sharing their ideas and coming up with new solutions. I want to introduce one of the insights here that's really important, not prematurely judging your own idea and then sometimes shutting them down. This can happen for a number of reasons, from experiences when you were growing up with societal or cultural norms to the critical environment in which ideas are suggested. In fact, we've all been taught from an early age not to look stupid by suggesting crazy approaches and to limit what we consider by early on imposing a reality check on them. We call this barrier to creativity and innovation the inner critic. One of the greatest deterrents to creativity is this inner critic. When doing your creative work, keep the critic in its place. There's a time to create and a time to evaluate. You don't want this judging presence looking over your shoulder, stopping the flow of creativity later. You want to be able to discern what works, what doesn't, what improvements are needed. That's when the judging voice becomes useful. We'll discuss many of these tools and how they can be used at various stages of the creative problem-solving process, and how you choose which one to use, which can depend on both the problem you're solving and the context in which you're solving it.